Welcome back to Radio Islam. This is Malik Mujahid. You're listening to WCV 1450 AM as well as www.radioislam.com. And now we'll be discussing with John Klerks about the Dubai's tallest building and earthquake-resistant building, and why does it matter for people to build so tall? John Klerks is the Research and Communication Manager of the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitats. In this position, he is responsible for creating knowledge on tall buildings by initiating and conducting scientific research, editing books about this topic, and by writing articles and reviews. Welcome, John.
Welcome. Hi.
So there are so many tall buildings that there is actually a council of it?
Oh, you bet. In 2009, last year, we celebrated that the council was 40 years in existence. So we've been busy with tall buildings for the past 40 years.
40 years, all right. And it is based in Chicago, it seems, because Chicago started the tall building culture?
That is correct. We like to say that Chicago is the birthplace of the skyscraper. Although the Council on Tall Buildings was founded in a university in a city called Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. It was one person by the name of Lynn Beadle, who was a professor at the time, who took a very keen interest into especially the structure on tall buildings. And he noticed that there was no international organization who would combine all the information and spread it amongst professionals and other people involved in tall buildings, which is the reason why he founded the current Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat. And approximately 5 years ago, the council moved to Chicago, where we are now based at the campus of the Illinois Institute of Technology.
Oh, at IIT. So how much of your work is focused on urban habitat and how much on tall buildings?
Well, it's actually 50-50. We look at the tall building as an object, as a piece of construction, as something that has to stand up. I mean, it's a lot of engineering and a lot of architecture comes at work as well. But you cannot look at the tall building as an individual entity. It is part of an urban context of a city, of a surroundings, which together make up the tall buildings and urban habitat. So we're trying to divide the attention between either the tall buildings and the urban habitat.
Now, we know that United Arab Emirates have Dubai, and Dubai now has the tallest building in the world. How tall is it?
It's 882 meters, and that's 2,717 feet.
Is it really very tall?
It's extremely tall. I mean, if you're standing in front of the building and you look up, you don't really realize how tall the building is, because the top of the building tends to fade away in the horizon, really. But you notice how tall the building is when you take a distance from this building, and then you realize it's sticking above everything else. It's really big when you take a distance from the city. So it really is that tall. It's extremely tall.
Now, what is the second tallest? I mean, how taller it is from the second tallest?
The second tallest building is a building in the Taiwanese city, Taipei, and that building has 101 floors. So the name of that building is Taipei 101, and that building is 508 meters tall. It would be 1,667 feet. So it's the difference between the number 1 and the number 2 is 320 meters. It's around 1,000 feet.
Wow.
That is big.
Is there any plan to, have you moved to Chicago to have Chicago reclaim this title? Because you seems to have moved at a time when Chicago lost its position for...
Yeah, that was a big debate at the time. Everybody in Chicago knows the Sears Tower, which is now being called the Willis Tower. It's been renamed last year. And then in 1998, there was a twin tower project in Kuala Lumpur called the Petronas Towers. And these buildings, they were about the same height, and it was a very big discussion if the spires on top of the Petronas Towers, which are part of the architecture of the building, would be counted to the total height of the building. Contrary to the Willis Towers, which has 2 antennas on top of the tower, but the antennas are usually not being counted to the total height of the building. So that was a very big debate we had on how to measure the height of tall buildings.
Now, are there plans by some other city to beat the Dubai building in place already?
Oh yeah, there's of course many plans, but having a plan to build a world's tallest building and actually to build the world's tallest building, that's quite a difference. If we look at the projects today, then one of the most serious contenders would be a building called the Kingdom Tower. That would be built by in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, and that was supposed to be 1,001 meters tall. And that is a reference to the 1,001 nights table in the Arab world. But it hasn't started construction yet. Actually, we don't even know what it's going to look like. So they talk seriously about it. It seems that it's something that people are working on it, but we don't know for sure if it's ever going to be built.
Now, why people need to build vertically while there is so much land around them?
Well, there's a famous tale by the first person who ever climbed the Mount Everest. When he did climb the Mount Everest and he came down, a journalist asked, like, why did you climb the Mount Everest? I mean, why would you do it? And his answer is, well, because it's there. And maybe the answer to why would you want a super tall building is just to see if you can do it. I think a very important element here, especially for the Burj Dubai, or the Burj Khalifa as it's being called today.
So Burj Khalifa is the name of that tower.
Exactly, that's the official name. They announced the official name during the opening. It gave Dubai a presence all over the world. Every news in the world, every newspaper in the world, every magazine in the world was talking about the Burj Khalifa as the new tallest building in the world. And just for a moment, Dubai had all the eyes of the world focused upon them. And Dubai, mind you, Dubai 30 years ago wasn't even a city. It was really a village next to a creek, and I don't think many people had heard about it. But nowadays, if you ask people about Dubai, they know Dubai because it has the tallest building in the world, it's got the biggest shopping mall, they got the largest hotel, and it really gives them a presence for themselves. Dubai really wants to be a big metropolis in the Middle East. They really want to be the biggest city, as they call it themselves, in between London and Singapore. It's the one place in the Middle East where you can do business, where you can do trading, where you can do shopping, where you can go for tourism. And it's really just a way of getting a presence in the world and trying to create a new economy next to the oil-based economy, which Dubai actually doesn't have a lot of. So with the money they had, they were trying to create a whole new economy that could live without the oil income and the oil expenditure.
You're listening to Radio Islam, and this is Malik Mujahid talking to John Klerks of the Research and Communication Manager of the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitats, and we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Radio Islam. This is Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with John Klerks of the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitats. So this Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world by 1,000 feet, is the second tallest. It seems it is going to be there for a while. Do you think tall buildings are a marketing ploy or a desert economy?
It's more things. I mean, there are different kind of tall buildings. Actually, there is no specific definition on what is a tall building and what is a low-rise building. But I think if you look at a city where the people want to come together to enjoy the foods, the restaurants, the shops, at one point, especially in the city center, then it's economical to make a building taller because you can obviously make more money and you can bring more people into one construction. So up to a certain point, I think it's very economical to have tall buildings in the city. But then if you look at the Burj Khalifa, that's not a tall building, that's a super skyscraper because it's so much taller than everything else. And people might wonder, like, why would you want to do a super tall building in the middle of the desert? It doesn't make any sense. Not everybody would want to live there. I mean, it takes a while before you get up there, and maybe people are afraid of heights. But I think that there is a specific group of people, and it's not everybody. It might only be 4 or 5% of the population of a city. But there is a small group of people who will always be interested into living in an apartment with a very nice view, having an office in a tall building, in a building that's famous, so you can explain to people where you live. And that's the market that's being developed by the super tall buildings. I was reading a newspaper article on a website from a person who owns an office in the Burj Khalifa. And he said that, well, I don't have to, the only thing I have to put on my address business card is my name and Burj Khalifa. And every mailman in the world will have no problems delivering the mail to the building. It gives you a stature, and it tells you a little bit about who you are. So I think that the super tall buildings represent a very specific market for the people who want to live in a city, who want to live close to restaurants and want to live close to shops, but they also want to have a nice view and enjoy all the amenities that are being built inside the buildings as well.
So I think council and tall buildings should have an office there.
You know what? I think so too. Maybe I should send them a very nice email asking if they want to give us an office because we are the council and tall buildings. But the people who developed the Burj Khalifa is a company called EMAR. They are sponsors of the council and tall buildings, so they already contribute to what we do. We're very thankful for that.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about is this thing going to be there if Dubai gets God forbid 7.5 earthquake?
Mm-hmm. If Dubai is going to get a 7.5 earthquake magnitude, then the tower will probably collapse because there is never going to be an earthquake in Dubai because it's not in the seismic region. So the building is not constructed to withstand the forces of a 7.5 earthquake. But we were just talking about the number 2 on the list, the Taipei 101. That is located in Taiwan, which is actually quite an active seismic region. So the people who designed the construction of the Taipei 101 really had to think about designing the building to be able to withstand an earthquake of a magnitude that happens maybe once every 2,000 years. And that means that they had to make a foundation that went very deep into the ground. Actually, and I just had to look it up, the Taipei 101 building has 380 piles that are 260 feet long, and they go into the ground and they're firmly embedded into the bedrock. So it's got a very, very solid foundation to make sure that the building will stand up in an earthquake. And also, and this is very typical for tall buildings in a seismic region, the Taipei 101 building has a very large ball of steel, that's what it is, in the top of the building, which will counterweight the movement of the building. So if the building is trembling and the building is going a little bit to the left, then the weight will be going to the right, so the trembling of the building will be minimizing. So those are all engineerical features that prevent the building from collapsing during an earthquake. But it is something that you need to take into account before you start designing the building.
So Burj Khalifa is not earthquake resistant?
It is, well, it will of course stand up given the geoseismic situation in the United Arab Emirates. If the Burj Dubai would be, for example, in Los Angeles or in Japan, which are very seismic regions, and these areas would have a very big earthquake, then the building would collapse because the building was not designed to withstand very big earthquakes. But then again, there will never be very big earthquakes in Dubai.
Okay. Now, Chicago is on some sort of fault lines and possible earthquakes and whatnot, and Muslims in Chicago, point out to CS Tower, well, whatever it is called now, and saying because it's a structural engineer was a Muslim, Fazlur Rahman Khan, so it's a pride for our kids here.
Yes, he's a very big hero in our world.
Right. So it is. Are Chicago buildings in downtown earthquake resistant by and large based on the seismic activity which might be in this region?
Yes, there's been done a lot of research about the ground of Chicago. So all the buildings here in Chicago have been built in mind with the situation of the ground level. Actually, the Willis Tower, the former Sears Tower, if you look very closely to the design of the buildings, it's not one building, but it's 9 towers which have been bundled together And you can see these little towers because they're not all the same height. Some of them are shorter, and two of them will go all the way up. And because it's 9 towers which have been built together, the building it's far more stable than when it would have been designed as one big building. So every building here in Chicago has been designed with the surrounding area and the ground situation in mind.
We are all listening and watching the unfolding tragedy in Haiti.
Yes.
This evening I was looking at TV, and the bodies are literally, on the street all over. And
Yes.
it is said that there may be more people buried than it is estimated at this moment. And some say estimation is wild, between 100,000 to 500,000 and whatnot. And aerial shots are showing almost all buildings which are collapsed, and they were cemented and all sort of, so heavy material was used, which is now has collapsed on the head of people. I saw the same thing in Pakistan. We were actually on air exactly this time and went through www.radioislam.com. A listener from that region called that I'm listening to this and earthquake is happening, and it was I think before the rest of the people in the media found out about it, but a listener called us, and there we studied it all. People making a little bit of money and putting concrete building up in the area, which is known for earthquakes and whatnot, and then dying under the rubble of that. What is happening to discover material, which is light material, so people can live in insulated places? But when it collapses, it doesn't kill people. I mean, there's one thing, of course, there's a whole science of earth resistance building and building codes in San Francisco and Los Angeles and whatnot. But what about poor people who Haiti, one engineer was saying this morning, I heard on NPR that they have no building code. Right. Suppose they are true, even if they have building code enforcement probably, because these are poor people. 80% people are below poverty line, and that is not U.S. poverty line, it is the Haiti poverty line. So what about the material? So you being in the council, which also is connected with urban habitat, what about the light material to build?
If you would ask me for one answer to that question, I would say that wood could be a very good material to construct these houses. But let me say, of course, to say that this is an extremely sad situation of which I don't think there is a solution, or I don't have a solution being from the Council on Tall Buildings. It's a very sad thing, because it is possible to build buildings and not have them collapse in the case of an earthquake, because we know what happens when there is an earthquake, and we know how to prevent them when building properly. And that's the saddest thing, because these buildings don't have to collapse if there is enough knowledge to create building codes and live up to the building codes. But I also got an article on the news that not everybody lives up to the building codes, that maybe to make a little bit more money, they build the buildings a bit cheaper. But by doing so, they actually make the buildings extremely dangerous in case of an earthquake, and then they will collapse. So it's just a very sad situation that we do have the knowledge to build buildings that do not have to collapse in case of an earthquake and do not have to kill people, but because of other reasons, and those reasons have to do with poverty or maybe people who don't want to live up to the rules, that this situation happens. I think it's a very sad thing.
Are there, Google probably reaches more people than building codes of a given city. So, are there in a public domain some information how to build earthquake resistance houses? I mean, a sort of a universal code which could be publicized, just like malaria, because earthquakes keep coming all over the place. And
actually, there is an international building code, and you can comply to that. But you can also, indeed, what you say, there is enough sources on the internet or in libraries to build earthquake-resistant buildings. And it's maybe something that just needs to be done, is to bring the information to these countries and actually teach them how to build buildings that are earthquake-resistant. That would be a very good thing to do.
Yeah, but that's the sad part of it,
It's very sad.
In Pakistan, in earthquake area, I kept asking different entities and foundation and aids and US aids and whatnot. People are just given the same, people are rebuilding right at the place where they have the disaster in exactly the same way, which killed 75,000 people there.
Right. That is a very sad thing. I'm sure that skyscrapers are not the solution for that. That's one thing I cannot solve.
Well, you find humor in a difficult situation as well. But so there is no material which is light material. I mean, even to build 2-3 floors building which are light material. I mean,
no, like I was saying, I would take wood for that, because wood is something that gives away when it moves. It's not a very stiff material. For example, in earthquake regions, you don't want to build a building that's very stiff, because if the building starts shaking, then the building might break very fast. Actually, what you want to do is make sure that the building moves along with the movement, that it has some kind of a flexibility in it, so it doesn't break. It's okay if the building moves and you get shaken up a little bit, but you want to prevent that the building collapse. So it's a kind of an overstatement here. But if you would make a building from rubber, let's say if you could do it, then the building would just be trembling in case of an earthquake, but it would never collapse.
What about a mixture of rubber and plastic?
That might be very well. I've never thought about it, but we just might have found a solution.
Well, we better go ahead and register some patent or something. Maybe rubber, plastic, and some air infused
there we go.
into that, and make bricks out of it. So if it collapses, make my day. It's a little toy here and there.
If that would be possible, I think we would have solved a lot of problems in this world. That would be fantastic.
Well, it may be just a fantasy, but I'm really troubled by how easily. I mean, these are people probably, since trees are gone in Haiti because of deforestation and all that, all they can do is make buildings with cements and all that, and not following any course. And
that is true. I can only hope that one day there will be no poverty left in this world. I think that will be a very great thing.
Well, tell us what is how is the the last question maybe, how does Chicago's future in terms of our lakefront tall building and skyscraper looks like? Are there many things in the offing, or the economy going to keep the tall building on ground level?
Well, what we've seen in the past year, that buildings that were under construction have now pretty much been completed. There is not a lot of new tall buildings going up. There is one university building in the city center in the Loop that will be starting construction this year. There is, of course, two main projects that were being put on hold in the past 2 years, which is, of course, the famous Chicago Spire, which is now just a hole in the ground, pretty close to the Navy Pier. And there is the Waterview building on Wecker Drive on the Chicago River in the Chicago Loop that reached till about 20 floors. And that is really a matter of putting the financials in place. At this moment, the developers don't have money to keep continuing to build the buildings. And everybody was hoping a little bit that Chicago was going to get the 2016 Olympics, because this would have been created a whole new market for hotels and apartments, and maybe because of something like that, there would be a new financial flow to get these buildings going. But for now, I don't have any idea when the construction of these buildings will start continuing again. We'll just have to wait and see. Everything that goes down will go up. So eventually the economy will go up again, and then we'll see what happens.
Thank you so much.
It's going to be quiet for the next year.
Thank you so much. We appreciate John for you being with us. You have been listening to Radio Islam, a call-in talk show from 6 to 7 p.m. 7 days a week on WCEV 1450 AM. Our executive producer is Imran Hussain. Our producer today is Tagreed Salama. Our engineer was Jeff Frizzle. Radio Islam is a Sound Vision Foundation production. The views expressed are the views of the host and the guests, not of Sound Vision Foundation. Be sure to check all our past shows at www.radioislam.com and tune in again tomorrow for another great day. That is right here at Radio Islam.